Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen a total of 8 important articles. We have 6 articles that require a detailed analysis as they're important both for prelims and mains, and a couple of small articles that are important for the prelims exam. So let's take up the discussion of all these articles and cover them comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Before we start, I urge you to join our official Telegram channel by scanning the QR code or by clicking on the link provided in the video description. Because after the session ends, we provide a daily quiz on these topics on our Telegram channel, which will help you attempt these practice questions and also revise these articles. So do ensure you join our official Telegram channel as well. So with this, let's get started by looking at the first article from page number 8. In fact, today we have a lot of articles related to economy. So let's start with this article that deals with the topic of net borrowing ceiling or NBC. This particular issue has led to a standoff between the state government of Kerala and the central government, that is the government of India. The government of Kerala has approached the court and it has alleged that the center is curbing the fiscal space and the autonomy that is available to the state government under the provisions of Article 293 of the Indian Constitution. So let's dive a little deep into this topic and understand what is Article 293. What do you mean by net borrowing ceiling? Because this is at the very root of the issue between the government of Kerala and the central government. See, recently, the central government has introduced the NBC, the net borrowing ceiling, which restricts the borrowing ability of the state government of Kerala. According to the NBC restrictions imposed by the central government, the state of Kerala cannot borrow beyond a certain limit. And this affects the ability of Kerala to raise finances to fund development programs and welfare initiatives. According to this ceiling, the borrowing of Kerala's government has been capped at 3% of the state's GDP. This ceiling is in line with the FRBM Act, the restrictions and the borrowing limits that are placed under the FRBM Act. FRBM stands for Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. The center has placed this 3% cap with regard to the state's GDP as far as its overall borrowing is concerned, and this limit will cover all the types of borrowing that can be done by the state, be it loans raised by the government, by the state government in the markets, or be it loans raised through financial institutions, or loans that could be raised with the state from the center itself. And sometimes what states do is they try to bypass these restrictions by borrowing through their state-run public enterprises. But the central government this time has extended the ceiling cap even to the state-run companies, thus limiting the ability of Kerala government to raise any fresh loans in this financial year. So the government of Kerala has alleged that this takes away the fiscal autonomy of the state. And thus it has approached the court that this is a violation of Article 293. The Constitution of India under Article 293 provides a certain flexibility for state governments to raise fresh loans and borrow funds in order to sustain the state finances. So the state government is alleging that the center is restricting the fiscal autonomy of the state, which is against the constitution, which is unconstitutional. And accordingly, the court has set up a constitutional bench to examine this critical issue, which could have major implications for fiscal federalism and cooperative federalism in the country. So let's understand in detail what provisions are contained under Article 293. To understand this, we need to look at chapter number 2 of part 12 of the Indian Constitution that deals with finances with regard to center and states. It provides for borrowing powers of the center and as well as the states. Under this particular chapter of part 12 of the Indian Constitution, we have Article 292 that contains provisions regarding the borrowing that can be done by the center, and Article 293 deals with the borrowing which is allowed for the state governments to maintain their fiscal independence. Because as you know, in a federal setup like India, the states, they do have their own jurisdiction. The states are responsible for administering the state subjects as listed under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So if the states have to be able to administer the state subjects and even some of the concurrent subjects under the 7th schedule, they need to have their fiscal independence, their fiscal autonomy. And the Constitution provides for that. So there are two specific articles under the chapter on borrowing, Article 292 and 293, that defines the borrowing powers of the center and the states. According to Article 292, the center can borrow, it can raise funds, meaning it can borrow through loans by providing the guarantee and security of the Consolidated Fund of India. Essentially, by using the Consolidated Fund of India as a guarantee and pledging it as a security, the center can raise additional funds by borrowing fresh loans from the markets. This provides fiscal space for the center. It allows the center to run a fiscal deficit if necessary in order to fund development and welfare programs. Sometimes it becomes necessary for the government to borrow from the markets and raise fresh funds in order to provide for development and welfare, especially when the revenue is not sufficient to match the expenditure. It becomes necessary to run a fiscal deficit, and a healthy fiscal deficit which is manageable is absolutely fine. As long as it is within manageable limits, as long as the government can honor these obligations and liabilities, a healthy fiscal deficit is absolutely fine. Similarly, under Article 293, the states are allowed under the Constitution to raise fresh funds through loans. So let's look at the provisions over here. According to Article 293, states can raise their own loans, but however, there are certain conditions. There are certain restrictions on the states. Condition number 1, the borrowing should be within the territory of India. States cannot go to international markets and raise loans, which could end up becoming a burden on the central government. Given the national considerations involved, the states, when they borrow under Article 293, it has to be within the territory of India. And also, the central government gets a lot of powers, in fact, discretionary powers under Article 293. Now, some of you might have a question, you might have a doubt. Sir, what if the central or state government breaches the capacity and ends up borrowing a lot, which could increase our fiscal deficit? What if the governments default on these loans? To ensure that this doesn't happen, our constitution makers, they introduced a clause. The Parliament under Article 292 and the state legislature under Article 293, they can bring out a law that can put a cap on the ceiling, that can put a final limit, a maximum threshold on the borrowing limit. So under Article 292, Parliament can bring out a law restricting the borrowing limit of the center. Similarly, under Article 293, the state legislature would pass a law that places a borrowing limit or a ceiling or a cap. And center also has a control over here under Article 293, where it can bring in a ceiling limit, especially in order to ensure that states are in line with the FRBM Act and its commitments. The center does have it does have the jurisdiction, the authority to bring in the ceiling limit. Apart from that, the center can even decide upon conditions that can be placed on the states. The states cannot borrow on their own without the center's approval, especially when the predecessor government has some outstanding debt. Now imagine in a state like Kerala, the former government had borrowed loans under Article 293, maybe from the central government itself. But let's say the predecessor government had not repaid those loans and there is an outstanding liability. In that case, the current government of Kerala, if it has to borrow under Article 293, it has to get the permission of the central government. The center has to approve it. This gives the center direct control over the state's ability to raise loans. Apart from that, under Article 293, states can request the center itself to provide the loan. The central government itself could lend out these loans to the state governments when necessary. And also, the center can provide security and guarantee of Consolidated Fund of India to help the states to borrow loans within the territory of India. Which means the center can assist the states to borrow loans by pledging the Consolidated Fund of India as a security and guarantee. It can allow and help the states to borrow loans, and the center itself can give out fresh loans as well to some of the states. But all these powers are discretionary. The center gets to decide whether these loans have to be given to the states or not, whether the Consolidated Fund of India should be allowed as a security and guarantee for a loan borrowed by the states. And also, if the predecessor government in a state has outstanding liabilities, then center can hold the approval for the current government and prevent the current state government from raising fresh loans from the market. So these are extraordinary powers given to the center under Article 293, through which the center can possibly restrict the fiscal space and autonomy available to the states. It is this issue which has now come under question. In fact, this case is so important because this is the first time in India's independent history that Article 293 is being examined by the Supreme Court. The constitutional interpretation of Article 293 is being examined for the first time by the higher judiciary, and that is why this issue becomes very, very important. There is an allegation that opposition-ruled states are being discriminated by the center. There is an allegation that the center is showing favoritism towards those states ruled by the same party. If the ruling party at the center and states are the same, it appears that they are easily getting fresh loans. There is no ceiling limit on their borrowing ability. And the center is even helping those states by pledging the security of Consolidated Fund of India. But on the other hand, it has been alleged that opposition-ruled states like Kerala are being discriminated through unfair conditions such as net borrowing ceiling, which has restricted the ability of states like Kerala to borrow fresh loans. So this is the question which has come up, which calls for constitutional interpretation of Article 293. Whether these powers of the center is valid. Can center restrict the fiscal space available to the states? So let's look at both sides of the argument. The center's argument is that this intervention by the center is necessary. It has to place a ceiling or a cap on the borrowing ability of a state in order to ensure that FRBM obligations are met. Because otherwise, states might borrow unnecessarily, increasing the fiscal deficit. And this could lead to an imbalance in the macroeconomy itself. So, if you look at center's viewpoint, it is justified to place such a ceiling, and according to the center, this does not violate fiscal federalism. But states, especially opposition-ruled states, they have a different view altogether. They have a completely different opinion. Their argument is that the center is discriminating against opposition-ruled states, placing these caps and ceilings only for opposition-ruled states. So it is for the court to determine whether these caps that are being placed by the center is constitutionally valid or not by interpreting Article 293. Now, this is where I would like to introduce you to the history of Article 293. In fact, there is a very interesting background over here that all of you should be aware of. Article 293 traces back its roots to Section 163 of Government of India Act 1935. Under this British era constitution, Section 163 allowed the provinces to borrow loans with approval from the central government. It gave a lot of authority to the federation, to the center. The center had direct control over the loans that could be borrowed by the provinces. And if there was a dispute between the provinces and the center, the Governor General of India, who is a British officer essentially, would decide whether these loans should be allowed or not. And the decision of the Governor General would be final. So this exact provision was of course not carried forward into our constitution. As you can imagine, this provision was not suitable for an independent India, because Section 163 provided the entire authority to a foreign national, to a British officer, the Governor General. So there was no way that this exact provision could be carried forward. But however, it was adopted as Article 293 with an update. It essentially gave those powers to the center. With the formation of state governments and central government, the center was given this authority to grant permission, to place restrictions or conditions. This authority was vested with the center under Article 293. But however, if you study Section 163 of Government of India Act 1935, you will notice that it urged the center and the Governor General to not place any unreasonable restrictions, to not use conditions to cripple the finances of the provinces. So this is a very important feature of Section 163, which can be found in Article 293 as well. Article 293 of the Constitution states that center cannot place unreasonable restrictions. It should have the authority to cap the borrowing ability, but those conditions and restrictions should not be unreasonable. Now, this is where the writer reminds us of the debate that took place in the Constituent Assembly in 1949 when the Constitution was being drafted. So, in the Constituent Assembly, there was a debate on Section 163 and how it should be continued in the new Indian Constitution. One important member of the Constituent Assembly, Ananthasayanam Iyengar, pointed out that states should be given their own space, their own independence to raise loans. And of course, the center will have the regulatory control over it. But Iyengar suggested that there should be a body like a finance commission, similar to the finance commission, maybe a constitutional body, which should take a call on these decisions instead of giving all these powers to the central government. To protect the federal nature of the Indian polity and to protect the fiscal space and autonomy of the states, this member of the Constituent Assembly had recommended that there should be a body similar to the Finance Commission, maybe a constitutional body, which will decide on the borrowing limits of the states. And it should not be decided by the center. Because if at all there are different parties ruling the center and the state, it will lead to friction. Center might place unreasonable restrictions and conditions, thus limiting the borrowing ability of the state, which could affect fiscal federalism. That is why Iyengar had recommended a constitutional body similar to the Finance Commission to take a call on these matters. But however, Article 293 does not contain such a provision. The authority has been vested with the center to decide the cap and limit and the restrictions with regard to the borrowing ability of a state. So it is this question which has come up in this particular case that Kerala has filed against the central government. Now, if you look at FRBM, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003, the cap or the target which has been placed is 3% of GDP. That is the fiscal deficit target. I am sure all of you would know that the center has breached the fiscal deficit and we have been struggling to achieve this target of 3%. Currently, if I'm not wrong, fiscal deficit stands somewhere at around 4.5%. As I told you, governments need some space to raise loans, and a reasonable fiscal deficit is absolutely fine as long as the government can handle and manage the liability. But this law is very critical to ensure that we don't borrow unnecessarily. Both center and states, they shouldn't borrow beyond their abilities, and it shouldn't lead to the ballooning of fiscal deficit. So for that reason, this law is very crucial, very critical. It places a fiscal deficit target not only for the center, but even for the state governments. States have adopted their own laws, similar versions of FRBM, placing a similar fiscal deficit cap. This law was amended recently in 2018, which has added one more condition, that the total public debt should not surpass 60% of the country's GDP. So given these obligations, it is important for the center to keep the overall borrowing by the governments under check. The center definitely has a concern about the rising loans, especially by the states, and to ensure that we remain within the determined target as per FRBM, the center should have this authority to regulate the borrowing by the states. But however, the counter argument here is that what if the ruling party at the center misuses this authority, cripples the fiscal space available to the state governments, and restricts fiscal autonomy? That is the big question which comes up. So my final point is, what should be the way forward? If both sides have a valid point, states also have a valid point, center also has a valid point, then what should be the way forward? The way forward would be to consider the recommendation of Mr. Iyengar, the then member of Constituent Assembly, who had recommended a body similar to the Finance Commission to decide on these matters. Instead of allowing the center to decide the borrowing limit and place conditions and restrictions on the borrowing ability of the state under Article 293, it should be a constitutional body similar to the Finance Commission that could provide for fair treatment to the center and states. Or another way forward would be for the center to be transparent in its policy, in its procedure. The center should bring in more transparency. It should ensure that the public is aware of the process being followed. The center has a duty to establish that it is not discriminating against few states, especially opposition ruled states. The center has to display that equity. It has to treat every state equitably while taking a decision on net borrowing ceiling, or while placing any kind of restriction or condition on the borrowing ability of the states under Article 293. It can't be seen to be showing favoritism towards certain states and discriminating against opposition ruled states. So if this can be done, if center can bring in more transparency into its own procedures by bringing out guidelines, that could also solve the problem. Or an even better solution would be to create a body, a constitutional body if possible, that can decide on these matters. So that is what we learned from this important article. Now, please let me know if you have any questions or doubts. Before that, let me give you a practice question. Contemplating the transforming economic, political and fiscal landscape in India, it is time to revisit Article 293 of the Constitution. Evaluate. So this is the question for you. I will discuss the approach for this question as well, but let's see if there are any questions, any doubts based on this topic. RJ says, recently Andhra Pradesh government has got World Bank approval on aid. See, that is aid being provided by the World Bank. Aid is not the same as loan. Let's see if there are any further doubts, any questions on this particular topic. Please let me know. Okay, let's move on. I will take a look at the doubts again. I'll come back to it. Don't worry. So how can you write a good answer for this question? You can start out with an introduction based on the opening statement which is provided here in the question. You can point out how states are playing a critical role in development. States play an important role in attracting investments. They play an important role in implementing development schemes and welfare initiatives. So you can justify why states need their own fiscal autonomy. You can even point out the constitutional provisions that provide for fiscal independence to the states. So that will make for a good introduction. Then you can mention in the body, at the start of your body, that the center does have a degree of control over state finances. Discuss the provisions of Article 293. Maybe a bit of background about Article 293 as well, referring to Section 163 of Government of India Act 1935. Because this is a 15-mark question. You have enough word limit and space to write an elaborate answer. So bring in this point, showing your knowledge about Article 293, its historical background, how states have been given their fiscal space, but center has the control as it can place conditions and restrictions. Then discuss the recent issue. So you're providing a real world example. You can bring out the current issue between Kerala and the central government, how this issue has erupted. So you're substantiating your argument with a current affairs example and then present the way forward. Suggest that, as recommended by Member of Constituent Assembly, Mr. Iyengar, maybe we should have a constitutional body to decide on this. And the center should also be more transparent about its guidelines and procedures while approving these loans and while setting the net borrowing ceiling. So that makes for a good answer. That could be your conclusion. In the conclusion, you can present the way forward and suggest your recommendations to resolve this issue. So please use this structure to write an answer based on what we have discussed and see if you can post the answer in the comment section. Now let's look at the next article, again from Economy. On page number 8, we have a column related to the issues being faced by workers in the gig economy, especially women workers. So first, let's understand why is this topic in the news. Recently, a few gig workers from India, women workers, they conducted the first ever digital strike. You would have heard about a trade union strike, a factory strike, which is a physical strike, where workers, they pull out from work and they protest against the policies of a company or the management. But probably for the first time in the world, we have seen a digital strike organized in India, that too by women. Women workers in the gig industry recently organized a successful digital strike against the exploitative policies of Indian startups and the gig sector of India. So what do you mean by the gig sector? Some of you might know about this, but I assume there would be beginners, freshers who may not know what's the gig sector. So let me explain what is the gig industry. The gig industry is nothing but your platform-based industry, the tech-driven platform-based industry. Today we have a number of startups in India, a lot of unicorn startups as well, which have built various apps that we all use in our day-to-day life. From e-commerce platforms to food delivery applications, cab aggregators. There are many such applications developed by Indian startups, foreign startups, which act as aggregators, which create a platform for service providers or for delivering products. So they employ a number of delivery executives. They employ a number of people on the back end of the supply chain to manage the logistics. So this industry is called the gig industry, the platform-based industry where you find these aggregator apps. So be it Ola, Uber, Zomato, Swiggy, and many others. They all fall under the gig bracket. So especially the delivery executives who are not full-time employees of these companies. They are essentially on contract. They are providing the logistical support. They act as the logistical backbone of this entire industry. Now, can you imagine a Zomato or a Swiggy or a Ola or a Uber surviving and running without the cab drivers, without the delivery executives? They form the backbone of the industry itself. But however, they are not full-time employees of these companies, which means they are not eligible for all the employee benefits. So there are a lot of issues concerning employees in the gig industry, and especially women workers are facing a number of issues and challenges. This was the reason why a digital strike was called during the Diwali festival, which is a peak season for these platforms. several organizations representing the women gig workers, they boycotted work, they switched off the apps, and they stayed away from the platforms to highlight their grievance, to raise their voice against these companies for exploitative labor practices. So let's look at this in slight detail. See, first of all, I would like to caution you about this article, because this article is biased. It's only looking at one perspective, that is the perspective of the gig workers, especially women gig workers. It is completely ignoring the industry concerns and the challenges faced by the industry. See, any UPSC aspirant should develop a balanced view and a balanced perspective. Sometimes newspaper articles or any media article could be biased in one favor on one side, leaving out the other side of the argument. So this is where you need to develop the balanced thought, and I think sessions like this conducted by us will help you develop that critical balance. So I will go beyond the article, since I disagree with the opinion of the writer, because the writer is presenting only one side of the view. Of course, those arguments are valid, but that is not the only perspective. There is another perspective to this, which I will try to bring in to the discussion so that you guys develop a balanced perspective. So if you look at the gig industry, let's look at the challenges, the issues faced by the workers, which are being highlighted by the author of this column. The writer correctly points out that gig workers are often exploited because they are usually contractual employees who are on contract with the company, which means the company can terminate them at any point in time. They are not paid any fixed salaries. There's no fixed salary which is paid to them. They are largely paid for every job, for every work which is done. For example, a cab driver gets paid only for the trip that he has driven. A food delivery executive gets paid only for the food that he has delivered. Apart from that, they don't get any fixed, there is no fixed remuneration. There is no fixed salary for them. I'm sure many of you, especially those from the middle class, can easily relate to this. How important it is to have a fixed salary, because that gives you a sense of security. When you don't have a fixed salary and you're getting paid for every job, every work done, right? If your remuneration is based entirely on the number of tasks that you're performing, then this could easily turn exploitative and it could increase the sense of insecurity. Because the only way to earn high is by performing more work. For example, if a cab driver has to earn more, increase his income to take care of his family, the only way the cab driver can earn more with these cab aggregators is by driving more, is by performing more trips. There is no other way. Similarly, if a food delivery executive or a delivery executive of an e-commerce platform or quick commerce platforms, if they want to earn more money to take care of themselves, their family, to meet their obligations, the only option they have is to deliver more. Take more orders, work 14 hours, 16 hours if necessary, to earn more money and get some incentives which might be part of the structure. Initially, when the startups rolled out their apps to attract the customers and as well as the delivery executives, they rolled out a lot of incentives, cash-based incentives. But today the incentives have gone down significantly, but still there is an incentive structure built into it. So only if they deliver 10 orders, 15 orders, or if a cab driver performs 15 trips or 16 trips, only then they'll get some incentives and they'll get paid for each trip. That is the only way they can increase their earning. Now look at an IT employee, for example. That is not the case, right? You're getting a fixed salary upon which there might be a variable, right? Irrespective of the work you perform, if you're meeting the basic requirement, if you're performing up to the expectation, fulfilling your KRAs, your company will pay you a fixed salary and you are guaranteed that you will take home this income in this month. So you can plan accordingly. You know you have a sense of financial security to take care of your family. Imagine gig workers do not have any of this. Let's say the gig worker fell sick for 1 week. They can't drive or they can't deliver. They will have no earnings at all, which pushes the family into financial insecurity. And upon this, the companies are building their model on cheap labor. Do you really think platforms like Zomato, Blinkit, Zepto, Swiggy, or any other gig platform would have succeeded if not for the cheap labor which is made available through our gig workers? If not for our cab drivers and delivery executives, this industry would have never turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Today, many startups are unicorn startups, attracting millions and billions in investments. But this money is mainly going towards scaling the business, even when the businesses are loss-making and the money doesn't really reach the gig workers. They are still getting paid almost like daily wage earners. If they work hard, they'll get some money, or else they will not get anything. Upon this, they don't have social security. Unlike salaried employees who might get insurance, then provident fund, gratuity, eventually pension, gig workers have none of this. There is no social security. Some companies, yes, they have shown concern. They have rolled out some social security for their delivery executives. But in general, across the industry, there is no social security for delivery executives. Now imagine the plight of women gig workers. In a patriarchal society, this patriarchy has entered the gig economy as well. If you look at any of these apps, certain jobs are largely limited to men. Women are restricted to traditional jobs as determined by the society. For example, only beauticians, masseuses, they would be women. But electricians, plumbers, or cab drivers generally, right, they would be men. So there is a clear gender hierarchy, a gender-based discrimination as well. The patriarchy has entered the gig economy as well. So women face a bigger burden to even get a job with these companies or to perform their role or even to earn a livelihood for their families. So that is the reason why the gig industry, especially the workers, are protesting. They're rebelling against the companies. In fact, over the years, many such strikes and protests have happened, but this was the first time that a digital strike was called, that too primarily by women gig workers. So these concerns of the gig industry, definitely they need to be appreciated, they need to be acknowledged, and the government and the industry should address this. But let's look at the other side, because the writer is blindly saying that industry is profit oriented, focused only on profit making, and they are blindly exploiting the gig laborers. But any private industry eventually will be profit driven. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that is how it should be. A company, if it has to create employment, if it has to create a sustainable, thriving business and drive the economy, it has to be a profit-making business. Yes, industry does need cheap labor. There's no doubt about it. Right? So there's no harm if companies are attracting VC investments and using the funds to scale their operations and build a better business oriented towards profit. And if they try to rely on cheap labor for that. The problem arises when the industry exploits the labor. This is where the line has to be drawn. Labor exploitation cannot be tolerated. So what is the way forward here? How do we resolve this complex issue? This is where the government should step in. The government should regulate the gig industry and mandate certain labor practices, labor standards. For example, maybe a fixed component as salary with some amount of variable or incentive as it is paid in other industries, especially service-based IT industries. Let the delivery executives and gig workers also get a minimum salary, let's say even 10,000-12,000 rupees a month, so that they have some kind of financial security. Along with that, let them be paid incentives for every task which is done. Push the industry through a regulation to provide social security to all the gig workers. Provide insurance, provide basic social security through provident fund, gratuity and pensions. This is how the issue can be resolved. Set working hour limits. Right? Gig workers cannot be pushed to work beyond a certain number of hours. It is insane to work 12-14 hours. Right? There could be industry leaders who might say you have to work 70 hours a week. They might even say 100 hours a week, but that is physically impossible, right? You will end up killing yourself. There is a lot of controversy regarding India's toxic work culture already, which is prevalent in our corporate industry, particularly in the startup sector. This is where the government should step in and regulate the industry, set labor standards. And this should not affect the business. Without disrupting the business, without affecting the industry or interfering with the business operations, the government should provide for minimal regulation and effective labor standards which have to be followed. That is the only way forward. So this, I think, is a more balanced argument than what the writer is talking about. The writer is simply presenting one side of the gig workers, which is understandable. We acknowledge that. But the writer doesn't mention anything about the industry challenges. It's not easy to run a private business and make it profitable, right? If it's not a profitable business, eventually the model will collapse, as we have seen with many companies. So it is important to strike that balance, and I think this discussion brings that balance into this article. So please take up this practice question, examine the issues faced by gig workers and suggest a way forward. So please take up this question, use the points I've discussed and write an answer for this question. Next, on page number 9, we have another economy related article. This time, the article focuses on India's demographic dividend. Now, I'm sure many of you would know what is demographic dividend. But for those of you who don't know, demographic dividend is when majority of your population is in working age group. If a large percentage of a country's population is within the working age bracket of 15 to 64, right? Such countries are said to enjoy a demographic dividend. So when you have maximum number of your people in the working age category, it means if you harness their productivity, if you give them basic education, take care of their health, provide them basic skills and create jobs for them, they will all be super productive, which will drive the growth of the country. Right? This is the basic logic. I'm sure since your school days, your college days, you would have heard about India's legendary demographic dividend. Everyone keeps saying that India has a fantastic demographic dividend. That is true. The statistics show that 3/4 of our population, that is nearly 75% of India's population, falls in the 15 to 64 age category. Now, this is massive. India does enjoy the demographic dividend as of now, which means we have most of our population in the working age group. And if we harness their potential by giving them education, taking care of their health, and giving them skills and jobs, the country can grow enormously. This is the future that everyone talks about. In fact, since last 30 years, all of us have been hearing about this. Since our childhood days as well, everyone would say that India has a great demographic dividend in the coming years, and the coming century would be dominated by India. India would rule and dominate the world. Yes, this assumption could be correct, but it's also important to understand that if you don't harness the dividend, if you don't take the right measures, this could just become a myth. This could just be a myth if you don't do anything about your dividend. The dividend might be present, but if you don't harness it, that is, if you don't give education to your youth, if you don't take care of their health since their infant childhood days, if you don't provide them with the right skills and don't create jobs in the economy, what will you do with the dividend? Now, just for example, UPSC aspirants might have access to the best classes. They might have full family support from the parents as well. You might have all the material all the time. But if you don't put the effort to complete your syllabus, attend all classes and revise and prepare and practice, how can you clear the exam? Right? Your UPSC dream will remain a myth. Correct? And as it is with UPSC, this could even become perpetual. You might perpetually believe that you have all the support, all the resources. And if you don't put the effort, even if you give 6 attempts or even 10 attempts, you'll never clear the exam. And that is exactly what the writer is saying about India's demographic dividend. We have simply assumed that our demographic dividend will yield results for India, that India will dominate the future, that this will deliver growth for India. And we have also presumed that this demographic dividend is perpetual, that it will last forever. But the writer is breaking this myth. This is not a silver bullet for India's growth. Just because you have a large population and majority of them are in working age category doesn't necessarily guarantee growth. It doesn't necessarily guarantee the development of the country. And more importantly, this dividend is not perpetual. It's not permanent, because eventually your working age population, they will start growing old. Today, we might have majority of our population in the working age category, but 20, 30, 40 years down the line, we all will become old, which means your old age population will rise. And if you cannot maintain a stable population, that country will be in trouble. If you don't tap and harness your demographic dividend right now, the country could be trapped in what we call as the middle income trap. See, with decades of effort, especially post-liberalization, India has transitioned into a middle income economy, right? Now, can you tell me which organization coined the concept middle income trap? Please let me know in the comments. Which organization came out with the concept of middle income trap? Please let me know in the comments. So what is middle income trap? According to this theory, countries reach the middle income level through right policies, right infrastructure, and right initiatives from the government. A country can improve its economy, create more jobs, increase its per capita income, improve its GDP numbers, and become a middle income country. This is quite easy. But the real challenge comes over here, because many economies have been trapped in the middle income bracket. They have never been able to get out of it. Very few countries in the world have escaped the middle income trap. Is that clear? Also find out which are these countries. Which countries have successfully escaped the middle income trap? Right now, India is at the risk of getting trapped in this middle income bracket. Many experts and analysts are of the view that with slowdown in India's growth, high levels of inflation, lack of employment opportunities, lack of skilling opportunities, poor education and healthcare, we might be trapped in the middle income category. We may never transition into the high income bracket. Very few countries have escaped the middle income bracket and transitioned into the high income bracket. So if we don't harness our demographic dividend now, we are at great risk, because we are going to deal with an aging population. With regard to India's population and fertility numbers, there are certain alarming trends which are already coming up. See, India had estimated that we should maintain replacement level fertility, which is 2.1, to ensure that we have a stable population. Essentially, this terminology called TFR, total fertility rate, it's a very key parameter. Total fertility rate is nothing but the number of children, the average number of children a woman has in her entire lifetime. So if the TFR is above 2.1, it basically means that every couple, they are replacing themselves with 2 children of their own, which means the population remains stable if TFR is at 2.1. If TFR is at around, let's say 3, it means every couple is on an average producing 3 children, which means the country's population will increase. It might even see an exponential jump in the population. But if the TFR is below 2.1, if it is below replacement level fertility, it means that every couple are having less than 2 children. Sometimes just 1 child or no children at all. And this could result in decline in population. Eventually, aging population will increase, your population will start falling. Many countries are burdened with declining fertility rates, growing old age population. Countries like Japan, Italy, Russia, South Korea, they're all dealing with this problem. And India is also headed towards the same. We were estimating that India is the most populous country. We need to contain our population and maintain a stable population. The target the government had set for itself was replacement level fertility of 2.1. But many states in India have already performed better than this. And the fertility rate has already gone down below 2.1. Take, for example, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. Their fertility rate has gone down to 1.75. Now, usually when fertility rates drop, this is seen as a feature of better education, better jobs, and better income. See, generally, historically as well, we have seen that around the world, as economies develop, as the people get educated, right, there is a greater tendency to have less children. or sometimes no children at all. If you look at your ancestors, let's say grandparents, great-grandparents, who may not be well educated, who didn't have a stable job, stable income, right? They would end up having 10, 15 children, almost building cricket teams individually, right? But today, if you look at the society, right, as the economies develop, as people get educated, as the marriage age is delayed, people tend to have fewer children, right? And that becomes the societal norm. So this is quite common. So the general understanding is that development reduces fertility rate. That if there is better education, better literacy, you can prevent child marriage, early marriage, right? You can provide for better sex education, better education about reproductive rights. So couple will tend to have more control over their body, over their own sexual health, leading to delayed parenthood. And it results in having fewer children eventually. But however, we are seeing a disturbing trend in even states like Punjab. Punjab is struggling with developmental problems. It's not that Punjab is very well developed, it has high levels of income. No. Despite having developmental problems, Punjab is also witnessing a falling birth rate. So this is an anomaly that we are witnessing in the Indian society. If you look at states like, let's say, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, these are the progressive, developed states of India. It's natural for the birth rates to decline because their development parameters are almost comparable to mid-level to high-level income countries. But even in the backward states, relatively backward states of India, the birth rate, fertility rate is dropping, which is a concern. Which means that eventually India will be left to deal with a large proportion of old age population with very limited development, limited education, growth opportunities. So there is a possibility that our demographic dividend may never be utilized. This might just be a myth and it's not perpetual, as you can see. At this rate, we will enter a stage of population decline. We are hardly a decade away from seeing a drop in our population numbers, and this will peak sometime in the middle of the century. After 2050, somewhere around 2070, we will see a drastic decline where we see the peak drop happening in India's population. So if we see the decline in population with increasing old age population, with no growth and being trapped in the middle income category, that would be a nightmare for India. Because when you have a higher proportion of old age population, you'll end up spending more on geriatric healthcare. Right? You will not have enough people to take care of the old people as well, and that becomes a burden on the economy. Many countries have struggled with this problem, and according to the writer, India is headed towards the same trajectory if we do not harness our demographic dividend. We still have the golden period with us. The golden window is still available to India because 75% of our population is still in the working age category. So what should we do? We should push them out of agriculture and non-productive work towards more productive work. A large proportion of India's working age population is trapped in agriculture, which is a low productivity sector. Number of Indians are trapped in non-productive work, including civil services aspirants. Because you're spending 2-3 years or more than that in preparing for the exam without contributing positively to the economy. I'm not discouraging you, but that is the fact. There are a number of unemployed people. Either they're not getting jobs despite having basic education and skills, or they lack the education and skills needed to get a job. In India, we are witnessing both. There is joblessness as well. The government has struggled to create more jobs. The industry is struggling as well. Plus, education, the skill development is not enough to train our youth. So this proportion of our population, they need to be pushed into the productive sector. The most productive would be manufacturing. This is what creates the maximum number of jobs compared to services industry. See, in India, in our economy, there is one more anomaly. Generally, countries transition from an agrarian economy to a manufacturing economy and then transition into services. But India has almost jumped the manufacturing stage, and most of the growth that we have seen is powered by the services sector. While this has been good for India, The problem is services sector will not create adequate jobs. Now, some of you might say, sir, look at IT industry. Look at the startups, how they have created jobs. Yes, they have. But let me give you the comparison. Take India's IT industry, the entire IT ecosystem of India. They hardly employ 5 million people. It's around $250 billion industry. It's a massive industry. Definitely it has created millions of jobs. Now let me compare this with a manufacturing sector like textiles. Textiles is a $150 billion industry. But you know how many people does it employ? Can you take a guess? It might be relatively smaller compared to your IT industry in terms of its revenue. But can you guess how many people are employed in the textile industry in India? Anyone? Can anyone take a guess how many are employed in the textile industry? Anyone in the comments? Can we scroll up the comments? 4 crore. Shubham, very good. It is 45 million. 45 million people are employed in the textile industry alone, and majority of them are women. So manufacturing industry will create more jobs. That is exactly what China did. Now, if you look at the growth story of India, China and compare the two, since liberalization, we have only moved 17% of workers from agriculture to manufacturing, which is a very, very small number. China did double. From agriculture, it shifted out close to 38%. 38% were pushed out from agriculture into other productive work in manufacturing and even in services. So China's performance was almost twice as better as compared to India. So this is the challenge India has to deal with. To ensure that we have more employment opportunities in manufacturing, the government will have to create the right opportunities. Provide for basic education, basic skilling and vocational skill opportunities. And also provide easy regulations for the manufacturing industry to thrive. Because look at the labor force participation rate in urban areas. It is just around 50%. Meaning more than 50% of our urban population are unemployed or they are involved in non-productive work. Even if you look at the female labor force participation rate, hardly 3 out of 10 women are employed in productive work. This number has to change, and those jobs, millions and millions of jobs, can only come from manufacturing. So what is the way forward? The way forward is to boost manufacturing growth. Simplify the policies, the regulations. Make it easy for factories to acquire land. Make it easy for MSME industry to secure loans. Remove the restrictions, facilitate the manufacturing industry, incentivize them to expand the manufacturing activity and employ more Indians. Of course, we should continue the support to services industry as well. We are not saying services should be ignored. No, services will remain a priority, but we should refocus on manufacturing and pull more workers out of agriculture and push them towards more productive work in manufacturing industry. This is how we can reap the demographic dividend, or else India will be stuck in the middle income trap and we will be dealing with an old age population, which could become an economic nightmare for India. Coming to the next article on page number 10, it focuses on wind energy. The article is related to a new policy brought out by the Tamil Nadu state government, which has been strongly opposed by the wind energy producers in the state. Tamil Nadu has introduced the repowering, refurbishment and life extension policy for wind power projects. As you know, wind power is a clean, renewable source of energy, and certain states in India have tremendous wind power potential. Tamil Nadu is one of the leading states in India when it comes to harnessing the wind capacity. It has thousands and thousands of wind turbines, and it has recently introduced a policy to repower, refurbish and extend the life of existing wind turbines. Because Tamil Nadu has been a pioneer in the field of wind energy since 1980s. So many of the wind turbines in Tamil Nadu are very old, outdated. They were built using outdated technology. They were set up in locations by using the wind maps of that era, which was not very accurate. Today, with advances in meteorological studies and satellite monitoring, we have better accurate information about wind sites, which can be potential sites for wind farms. So there is a need to upgrade these wind energy plants. There is a need to repower and refurbish the old outdated wind turbines so they can produce more energy and the business becomes more feasible and profitable. That's why Tamil Nadu government has introduced this policy, but however, it is facing opposition from the industry. So let's understand why. So first, I would like to give you some important facts which can be very important for your prelims. India's total potential for wind power is at 1163 gigawatt with regard to wind turbines which are more than 150 meters tall. Usually when it comes to wind energy, turbines are of two heights, 150 meters and above, 120 meters and above. So 150 meters and above turbines, which are gigantic turbines, they have a total potential in India of producing 1163 gigawatts of energy. The smaller turbines at 120 meters above ground level, their potential is estimated at 695 gigawatts. Now, which are the leading states in India when it comes to wind energy? The number one state is Gujarat. Please remember this for your prelims. There can be a prelims question. Gujarat followed by Tamil Nadu, then Karnataka. Then comes Maharashtra, Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh. These 6 states collectively contribute 93.37% of the total installed capacity of wind power in the country. Another important fact for your prelims. So, these wind turbines which get old, they need to be maintained, just like any equipment, right? I'm sure you maintain your bikes, your cars, you replace the spare parts, you try to refurbish them. Similarly, wind turbines also require maintenance and upgradation. So, repowering refers to the complete replacement of the old turbine with a new turbine so that more energy is produced. The old turbines were not so efficient. So today you have better technology, more efficient turbines. So if you remove the old turbine, replace it with an entirely new turbine, which can be more efficient, produce more energy, that is called repowering. Refurbishing refers to small upgrades, like increasing the height of the turbine so it can tap the wind potential, or replacing the blades. The blades might have a lot of dust deposition, they might have rusted, right? They might have gone through a lot of degradation. So efficiency would have been lost. So change the blade itself or increase the height of the turbine or install better gearbox with a better capacity. This is called refurbishing. So through repowering and refurbishing, you can increase the life expectancy of old wind mills. So this is what Tamil Nadu is pushing for. It's mandating the companies to invest in repowering and refurbishing to increase the life expectancy and produce more energy. But however, this incurs a cost for the companies. The current companies which are operating these wind energy plants, they will have to invest in repowering and refurbishing the old outdated wind turbines in Tamil Nadu. So that is the reason why they are opposing the changes. They are opposing the new policy. Their argument is that the increased cost will make the business unviable. They are arguing that the extra power generated will not match the cost that they are going to incur because of these fresh investments, thus rendering the business unviable. So that is what we learn from this article, just some basic facts and why it is important to repower and refurbish the old turbines and how it could increase the cost for the companies. So with this, let's look at the smaller articles in today's newspaper. On the front page, we have an important update regarding the Khalistan movement. A wanted terrorist, Arshdeep Singh Dalla, has reportedly been arrested by Canadian authorities in Canada. Now, this comes as a major breakthrough, but however, the reports are not entirely confirmed. Sources have informed media outlets that most likely one of the most wanted terrorists, Khalistani terrorist, Arshdeep Singh Dalla, who was hiding in Canada, has been detained by Canadian authorities. Now, the question is, who was Arshdeep Singh Dala. He was seen as one of the close aides of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the former chief of Khalistan Tiger Force, a Khalistani terrorist outfit which has been listed under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Last year, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot dead in Canada, which led to allegations by Canada that Indian government was involved in the assassination. This has already disrupted and affected India-Canada ties, as you already know, because we have covered this topic multiple times. So the update here is that Arshdeep Singh Dala might have been arrested by Canada, and apart from that, in India, some of the close aides of Arshdeep Singh Dala and Hardeep Singh Nijjar have been arrested by Punjab police. So this has led to speculation whether India-Canada are finally cooperating, because these simultaneous arrests happening in Canada and India is not a coincidence. So there is speculation that maybe behind the scenes, are India-Canada trying to repair the damage in the relationship? Is there some kind of cooperation through which both sides have been able to detain and arrest some of the wanted Khalistani terrorists? So that is the development. Next, on the front page, we have another security-related update from Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir has seen a major spike in militancy in the last few weeks. I have been mentioning this repeatedly in various sessions. The last 1.5–2 months has been quite unprecedented. After several years of calm and peace and stability, there is a major spike in terror attacks, and this time in the Kishtwar region. So both in Jammu and as well as in Kashmir, in both the sectors, we have seen a major spike in terror attacks. Several civilians have been killed, several Indian soldiers have been martyred, and several terrorists have been killed as well. So in this recent attack, a special force operative from Para SF of the Indian Army, the Para Commandos, one of them has been martyred in this recent incident, and we are seeing a major spike in terror attacks. So this could be a warning sign. The fact that recent elections were held in Jammu and Kashmir, and there is a possibility of statehood being restored as promised by Prime Minister and Home Minister. In the backdrop of these big changes, political changes, the spike in terrorism will be a major concern. Again, this is not a coincidence. The developments are linked, and there could be a Pakistani involvement designed to fuel terrorism against India, to create fresh instability, to derail India's plans for Jammu and Kashmir. This latest attack was claimed by a new terror outfit called Kashmir Tigers. There is a new so-called outfit, a terror outfit called Kashmir Tigers, which Indian intelligence agencies believe to be an offshoot of Jaish-e-Mohammed. It's believed to be a new branch of Jaish-e-Mohammed, and it has claimed the attack, and the Indian forces are tackling the threat. Now, coming to the prelim section, last two articles for today. We have an article on page 4 that refers to the Hooghly River. The article is focused on the Durga idols, which are immersed in the Hooghly River, which holds a lot of religious sacred importance for Hindus. Following the Durga Puja, the idols are immersed in the Hooghly, and this results in an environmental problem. The toxic colors which are used, the paints, leads to leaching of hazardous substances, even heavy metals, into the water, causing severe water pollution. So that is the focus of the article. But I have a question for you on the Hooghly River. I have given 3 statements about the Hooghly based on its geography. So I will not give you the answer now. Read the statements carefully. The Hooghly River is the westernmost tributary of the Ganga. It is known in its upper reaches as the Bhagirathi. It meets Farakka feeder canal, which is part of Farakka barrage that is disputed between India and Bangladesh. So please find out which of the statements are correct. Let me know the correct answer in the comments. Now, if you want the correct answer for this question, please join my Telegram channel. After the session ends, I'll post the question with the correct answer in the explanation. Now, coming to the last article for today, France has expressed interest to buy the Pinaka rockets from India. Pinaka is an indigenously developed multi-barrel rocket launch system. I'm sure many of you would have seen this image during Republic Day parade. a truck, the Tatra truck carrying an entire barrage of rockets. This is the Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launch system developed indigenously in India, which has been inducted into the Indian Army. Several countries have shown interest given the versatility of this rocket system. So basically it's an artillery weapon. So Armenia became the first country to procure the Pinaka rockets from India. During the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, India became a leading defense supplier to Armenia, and we supplied the Pinaka rockets to Armenia. Now many more countries are showing interest, and France has also shown interest. Generally, it's the other way around. We often procure defense equipment from France, be it the Scorpion or diesel-electric submarines, the Rafale fighter jets. France is a leading supplier of defense technology to India. But now France is seeking India's help because France is looking to replace its old rocket systems, especially after the Russian threat following the Ukraine war. France is upgrading its artillery and land-based weapon platforms. So it's looking at a versatile rocket system, a multi-barrel rocket launch system, and it might consider India's Pinaka rockets. Currently, it has a range of around 38 kilometers, and there are extended range variants available as well. Plus, India is developing guided rockets and different ammunition, which can easily increase the range anywhere between 120 to even 300 kilometers. That is the eventual plan of India, to step up the range of Pinaka rockets from 120 to 300 kilometers and ensure that these rockets are guided so that they can precisely hit the target. So France showing interest in this defense product from India is a big development. And also the article mentions one of the military exercises between India and France. Exercise Shakti. This is a joint exercise between the two armies, the Indian Army and the French Army. So please make a note. Now, can you find out the names of military exercises between the two navies and the air force of two countries? The Indian Navy and French Navy also have a joint exercise, and Indian Air Force and the French Air Force also have a joint exercise. Find out those names, mention that in the comments. So this is it for today. With this, we have completed all the important articles comprehensively. I hope you guys have liked the session, understood everything. And if yes, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. So we'll see you in the next class. Till then, take care. Have a good day.